They are Dennis Hession and Ben Stuckart. This is a nonpartisan race, and all voters in the city of Spokane will cast ballots. Gentlemen, we will begin with your opening statements of 1.5 minutes, with a reminder that you are asked to address why are you running and why, if elected, are you the best person for the office. Beginning with Mr. Hession.
Thank you. As a candidate for the office of City Council President, I offer you 3 things. My experience as the President of the Council and as Mayor of Spokane. My leadership as Chairman and President of numerous private, nonprofit, and governmental boards and councils, and a plan for the present and a plan for our future. I served as Council President for 2 years and as Mayor for 2 more. I am proud of the many accomplishments during that time. Throughout my life, I've been dedicated to community and public services and many experiences in leadership roles. Board work with nonprofits and foundations, national and state boards, my election to public office have been an important part of my life. I spent many hours engaged with the public, made difficult decisions, and found solutions to challenging public problems. My public service has made me a better person and a better candidate for this office. And I have a plan for our city finances, which requires us to be accountable for the taxes and fees you pay, and a plan for our future, which will energize the city and where we will partner with our businesses to create jobs and bring prosperity to our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stuckart.
Thank you very much to the League of Women Voters, and for those of you watching on television and those of you here. My name is Ben Stuckart. I was born and raised in Spokane, went to Lewis and Clark High School and Gonzaga University, and I'm running for City Council President because I'm tired of the services that we value as a community coming into conflict with the revenue that we have as a city. And I think there are some very specific things that we can do so that we can pay for those things like police, public safety, our roads, libraries, our parks, which are all being threatened with cuts. They have been being threatened with cuts. We need to focus on 3 specific areas, I believe, in the future in order to move forward as a city. I believe we need to focus on small neighborhood business centers like Perry Street and Garland District. Those are areas where, once those businesses thrive, density is created and revenue is created so we can pay for those things that we value. I believe we need to focus on industrial growth and bringing companies to Spokane. There's an area east of Market Street in Hilliard that for 85 years we have not invested in infrastructure in. And if we want to attract companies, we have to have an area to sell. And the third area is the University District in our urban core. We need to focus on how to sustain the support that Downtown Spokane Partnership currently gives the University District. I have the right kind of experience for the position. I was regional manager for Tickets West for 6 years, and sales increased from 21 million to 34 million. I currently run a nonprofit that during the recession has grown to help thousands of children. I ask for your support.
Thank you. And now we'll move into some questions that have been formulated by the League's Voter Service Committee. Given the city's financial constraints, where do you believe the city should trim the budget and/or raise revenues? You have 1 minute for your answer, beginning with Mr. Stuckart.
Well, I think first we need to look at the budget as a whole. The assumption in the finance meetings that I've been to for the city of Spokane assume a 6% increase. And in my time as the regional manager for Tickets West and managing a multi-million-dollar budget, and at my time at Communities and Schools growing that organization, the assumption is never that you just have a built-in 6% increase. So my time every month, one of my responsibilities for the last 12 years, has been to look at budgets line by line and look for where are those areas that we can cut. So I have the ability to do that. I also believe that I'll need the experience of looking at the budget in order to see that and in order to actually pick out places. I'm not sure, there are a lot of ideas floating out there about revenue sources for this year, but I believe that the long-term solution, so that we stop having this question be asked every year, is for us to focus on specific things that we can do to grow our economy.
Thank you. Mr. Hession.
Thank you. I think the first point is that we need to hold the line on our expenses. Because we've, in the past, we just seem to increase our budgets regularly year after year after year. That means a challenge with us to work with our unions and our employees to find ways to cut our expenses and to share the expenses of health care and retirement. Secondly, I do not have specific points about our departments that I would look toward to cut. What I think we need to do is look at every department, and every department has to be able to justify in a specific way how they do their business and to make the case of whether they're doing it in the most efficient and effective way. And then finally, I'm not in favor of looking at other than the revenue sources, thank you, that come along with the building of our economy. That will come. That's a long-term solution. That's not a short-term solution. That money doesn't turn around right away. But those are the ways that I would balance the budget.
Thank you. You've had an opportunity to hear each other's answers. You now have an opportunity for a 30-second rebuttal, beginning with Mr. Stuckart.
I believe there are things that we value, like the libraries, and we've had that discussion in the last year, where the East Central Library, and through great work of people coming together, we were able to save it. But I'm not in favor of losing the libraries. I'm not in favor if the budget that the mayor proposes on October 24th cuts the arts department. And so if we have to save those things that we value, revenue will have to be on the table.
Mr. Hession.
My opponent is on record of talking about looking for new ways to find revenues. I'm not looking for new ways to find revenues. I want to focus on the expense side of the budget and not on the revenue side of the budget. We have a crisis in our city with many of our citizens living below the poverty line and are struggling to make ends meet right now. I don't think we should be further burdening them or our businesses with additional revenue requests. Thank you.
Moving on to the next question, and as we all know, the economy continues to present a challenge for local municipalities. What are Spokane's strengths when it comes to affordable housing, and what are Spokane's weaknesses? And how can we improve upon those weaknesses? 1 minute for your answer, Mr. Hession.
Well, certainly we need to work with our home builders and our other contractors and developers to find ways to make the process of working with City Hall a seamless process. Right now, our Building Services Department, our Planning Services Department do not have the greatest reputations with the Home Builders Association or the other contractors and developers throughout the community. That needs to be fixed, and I think it's an easy fix. Secondly, I would say that we have an opportunity here to be the council members and as well as the mayor's office have an opportunity to showcase the city as a wonderful place to live and work. And we need to be able to show our citizens that we have an opportunity for us to showcase our assets. There are many assets that we have, including the airport, the university district, and things that we need to develop plans to specifically embrace and promote.
Thank you. Mr. Stuckart.
I think we have some great areas of town with affordable housing, like the Garland District and the Perry District, and I think we need to build on those around our community. And there are a couple specifics. Kendall Yards is a great project that sold out its first phases, but under changes and regulations that the city put into place in 2006, Kendall Yards and similar projects could not happen. There was an infill study done that came out in March of this year, and the report came out. It was 2 years of developers and the city working together to figure out how to increase affordable housing and infill the areas that are currently vacant in our community. And the City Council has not acted upon that yet. And as City Council President, I would adjust those things like setback rules and other things that the infill study calls for, and I think that those would be implemented immediately in order to spur that development. And I also think if we focus on those small neighborhood business centers and the rules that exist that are detrimental to them opening their new businesses, that we can spur new affordable housing as well.
Thank you. And gentlemen, once again, you have 30 seconds for a rebuttal. Mr. Hession.
Well, I thank my opponent for raising the question or talking about Kendall Yards and what happened in 2006, because I happened to be the mayor at that time, and to talk about the things that I did at that period of time where we had environmental issues and we had issues related with our our neighborhood councils that were concerned about the new PUD to be built. We negotiated resolution of those by finding new ways to get low-income housing and to take care of the environmental problems, which led to the eventual adoption of that new PUD with the many benefits to our citizens.
Mr. Stuckart?
Yeah, with all due respect, in regards to the neighborhood councils and low-income housing, it was our former mayor that proposed that we use the neighborhood council CDBG funds in order to promote Kendall Yards when it was first a Chesron project, and the neighborhoods are still angry about that. So I don't think during Mayor Hession's term that he actually moved the city forward on that. And as for those PUD regulations that happened in 2006, the infill study calls for the reversal of those, and that's developers and the city working together.
Well, and that transitions well into the next question. How would you prioritize community development block grant money in Spokane? You have 1 minute for your answer. Mr. Stuckart.
Well, community development block grant money, actually, I'm a recipient of some of that in neighborhoods around Spokane in my current job as Director of Communities and Schools. And so it actually has a benefit for improving infrastructure in communities. So if we look at Market Street and the new developments on Market Street, it's ready to become a thriving retail center because of community development funds. But then 15% of those funds are targeted towards social service agencies that help meet the basic needs of our citizens. And so I think those are both important, and I think the process works very well right now.
Mr. Hession.
We are the beneficiaries of community development block grant funds, and they are wonderful, and they've done amazing things over many, many years for our citizens. Mr. Stuckart refers to some information about Kendall Yards, and I think that it would behoove him to get his facts straight. Because what happened in the Kendall Yard issue is that we decided that we were in crisis with low-income housing. We had some major hotels and apartments that were being reprogrammed and vacated. We had many people on the street. In answer to that, rather than be using the CDBG money for things like repairing roofs and sidewalks, which is an important mission, we proposed to leverage that money to be able to provide more low-income housing in a larger way. That was the true story about CDBG. It had nothing to do with Kendall Yards.
Again, you have 30 seconds for a rebuttal. Mr. Stuckart.
Well, I'd just like to kind of go back to the infill study and the changes in the 2006, that those haven't been addressed, and those are barriers currently to development of the low-income housing and the CDBG funds, using those. But also in regards to the Kendall Yards, I think Mr. Hession and I are just going to disagree about the historical accuracy of that. I've had conversations with different heads of nonprofits around the community, neighborhood councils, and one of the department heads at City Hall, and there's just a differing of opinion, I believe, on this subject.
Mr. Hession.
Well, the fact remains there's no evidence to support Mr. Stuckart's contentions. But I would like to say that there is a need, an ongoing need, and the community development block grant money is an amazing asset for us. And we can use it properly to provide specific assistance to some of our low-income neighbors. But we also need to be thinking bigger at this time. Leveraging funds, developing partnerships is the only way that governments are going to survive into the future. This was an excellent proposal and an excellent way to do just that.
Thank you very much. We're now going to move into some questions. You will not have an opportunity for rebuttal. What steps, if any, would you take to ensure that Spokane is served by a police ombudsman with independent powers to conduct investigations? Beginning with Mr. Hession.
Thank you. It was my pleasure to have been the mayor at the time that I developed and proposed a ombudsman process. I was concerned when I came into office about the way that we handled our police oversight. I knew that there was a challenge to that process and that we needed something better for the citizens. I hired an expert who came in and talked to our citizens and talked to our staff and talked to our police officers and made a recommendation that we adopt the Ombudsman program, and it is an outstanding program. The police oversight program, though, does require and does demand that the Ombudsman have investigatory powers. My personal feeling is that I think we should have appealed that decision as opposed to go back to the table, but I don't have all of the information that the City Council used to make that choice. I certainly think it's worthwhile, and I think that we can bargain with our guild to come to a resolution of that problem.
Thank you. Mr. Stuckart, 1 minute.
Yes, this is a very, very sad time in our community that with the AutoZem crisis that we need strong police oversight. The Ombudsman ordinance that was passed in 2008 was toothless and did not allow for independent oversight. That's not a solution. A solution is an ombudsman that independently is able to investigate and can bring those reports forth to the public. And so there are 4 specific things we can do. We can send it to the appeals court. We can work with our state legislature in the meantime to change those rules on collective bargaining. We also can bargain during this year with the bargaining and talk to the guild about the issue and see if we can get that oversight. And fourth, if it comes to it, the council needs to put a resolution, an ordinance on the ballot directly so that citizens can vote, and then that collective bargaining conflict doesn't exist. So there are 4 things we need to do immediately in order to move this forward. If one doesn't happen, the next needs to happen. Some of them can happen at the same time, but we need strong independent oversight because the Ombudsman ordinance in 2008 was not enough.
Thank you. For the next 2 questions, you'll be limited to 30 seconds for your answers. What opportunities can you envision for citizen volunteers to perform tasks that might fill in for city services that have to be cut to balance the budget? Mr. Stuckart.
Well, I currently serve on the Arts Commission, and one of the things that our last Arts Commission meeting was that the initial mayor's budget included cutting the arts budget, and so arts commissioners are having active conversations on what roles they can play. Now that's not ideal, and I don't think that the youth department, the arts department, the weights and measures departments should be on the chopping block, and if we want to stop that conversation, we need to think 5 to 10 years down the road and how are we going to promote economic growth in our community.
Thank you. Mr. Hession.
I would say a couple of areas. One, of course, we have very technical things that go on in the city that do not lend themselves to volunteers. But we have a great active program in our volunteers to the police department that can do parade work and some other things that are, I think we can exemplify that. I was on the park board for 11 years, and we very effectively used volunteers in that role. We have an Adopt a Park program. I think volunteers could take care of that. We could have people adopting some of our islands around town. We've tried that before. We can get more active in doing that as well.
Thank you. At the end of your term, how would voters be able to determine that you had done a good job as council president? 30 seconds, Mr. Hession.
Well, I think the council president's responsibility is to make sure that the council members make good choices. And I think if you watch and look at and review the decisions that are made by the council, if they appear to be civil and appropriate interaction between the council members among themselves, do they appear to be informed about the issues? Do they have respectful interaction with the people who come to speak to them? That the public feels like they have had a voice in the decision, then you will be considered successful.
Mr. Stuckart.
I think that at the end of a term, once my 4 years is over, the success should be that the council president role is leading in efforts to increase economic growth so that we no longer cut services or raise taxes. We're focused on neighborhood business centers. We're focused on bringing companies to Spokane, doing specific items to do that, and also that the council is clearly communicating with the public. Right now, part of the problem with the utility rate increases is that they were not properly communicated with the public, and I believe there needs to be a monthly forum with the public to communicate.
Thank you. We're going to move on to your closing statements. You will each have 30 seconds, beginning with Mr. Stuckart.
Thank you very much for watching. Thank you, Dennis, very much. I think you've seen some clear differences tonight. I come from a position where I've had success in the business world, success in the nonprofit world, and want to bring that success to city government. Dennis has been in government, but we need new ideas as a city. We need to move forward. So I'm asking you, visit my website at benstuckart.com. Look at the specifics. Look at what I'm going to lead the city doing in order to move us forward so that we don't have to sacrifice the things that we value. Thank you for your support.
Mr. Hession.
Thank you, ma'am. Abraham Lincoln once said, "You cannot keep out trouble by spending more than you earn." We are in trouble, but we cannot tax and spend our way out of our budgetary problems. We need fiscal discipline, and that means no new taxes and no increases in fees. My opponent suggests we look for new sources of revenue. I believe we should live within our means. I would be honored to have your vote. Thank you.
And thank you to the candidates for City of Spokane Council President. They are Dennis Hession and Ben Stuckart.